house.
We're live.
Oh, okay.
So, Raquel, welcome
Yes.
to the Onward Podcast. Thank you for being my guest tonight.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to talk to you. But first, before we start, I wanted to say that I heard you on live with Annie on a LinkedIn, Annie Lieb, and you were saying that she hadn't invited you on her show, and I feel the same because I haven't been on her show either. So I was wondering if you could tell me, like, what did you have to do to get on her show?
You know what? She actually reached out to me, but I think it's because she reached out to me when she saw me. I was on a live stream with Travis Lackner. You know Travis Lackner?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a guest for Travis's live stream. It was like a special art segment. And then he also invited one of my girls from Raq The Boat from the YouTube channel from
cool.
A 16-year-old. So she was on there as a guest as well. And so she was watching it. And then that's when I got the message that said, see, here's Ed. They got them. And then she's like, hey girl, I can't believe you haven't been on my live. Like, let's do this. I'm like, yeah, it's about time.
Yeah. Well, maybe if she doesn't see this, maybe you can just tell her that Emily hasn't been on her live either. So just a reminder,
Well, you're probably like me, right? Where it's like, you don't want to, it's one of those things where there comes a point where you're like, I don't want to ask, like I want to be asked, right? Like because you want the person that's actually hosting, you want them to be like, hey, I really want this guest on here because I feel like they're going to bring value, right? So if I'm not being asked to be on their live, then there's a reason. And I don't want to be like, hey, please, because then they might be like, all right, fine, come on. And then they're like dreading it. And then the chemistry is not there. So there has to be kind of that element of like, you be wanted.
Right.
And I don't know. And now, it sounds
like I'm not wanted. That's what you're telling me. That's
so basically, I just told you that you're
Carl
not
will have me on his show. Hi, Carl.
Hey, Carl. I've been on Carl's live. Have you been on Carl's?
I've been on his live once. We were talking about imposter syndrome. I felt like I was an imposter when I was on live.
You felt like you were being the imposter talking about the imposter.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So anyway, we're talking tonight about embracing your inner child as an adult. Yes. And I'm really looking forward to that. You want to talk about being real and vulnerable and transparent. So I'm assuming that's the way you're going to be tonight on the show. But
absolutely. I don't know how to be any other way at this point. Like, honestly, like I think I've already crossed that like threshold in a way where like super crossed it where I'm like, there's no coming back.
Well, when did you cross it?
You know what? I want to say I crossed it, I think, about 2 years ago on LinkedIn when I shared my story about depression. And
did you go on live? It was before live, right?
No, it was before live. And it was during Mental Health Awareness Month. And I had a colleague of mine who's actually the president of a mortgage company and is very vocal about mental health awareness. And he did a video about how, like, as leaders, we have to really speak up and we have to be the ones to change the narrative. Because as leaders, if we're not doing it, then, nobody else is going to do it. And in that moment, I thought, you know what? I already have a ton of visibility on here. I have a platform. I'm someone that people assume that I'm just this, like, I've always been this happy-go-lucky person and I've always had a really good life and everything's great. And I was like, I need to be that person to share my story so that people realize that, there's a lot that goes behind closed doors, right? Just the whole thing of like, you never know what someone's going through.
Right.
And so I went ahead and in that moment, I just grabbed my phone. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to speak from the heart. And I pressed record and it was like 6 minutes long. I shared my story. I was like, tearing up because it was like the first time I was not only going public, but going public on a platform that I had a lot of followers.
Mm-hmm.
And a platform that is not like a Facebook or an Instagram. It's a business platform. So there was a lot at stake there. And I went ahead and did it. And I'll never forget, I did post and then I went to work and I almost had like an anxiety attack because I was like, what did I just do? And immediately I started getting phone calls, texts, messages like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Wow, you're so brave. Oh my gosh, that's so courageous of you. Oh my gosh, like I've experienced the same thing. Like the amount of support and just like positive feedback that I got from it just made me realize like, okay, I got to keep doing this. I got to keep talking about it because people obviously,
that's okay.
By the airport, people obviously need to hear this. And so that's kind of like, that's where it just took off from there.
Yeah, that's good. Carl's
I
saying,
know he's so sweet.
Carl's our big supporter tonight.
Yeah, woohoo!
Everyone else is out drinking for St. Patrick's Day.
I know, right? But I tell people all the time, like, as long, like, when you do a podcast, like, if you can just reach one person, or if one person's listening and it can really make a difference, then that's all that matters. So who's to say that Carl's the one person that needed to like hear a conversation tonight, right?
And then I also publish it as a regular podcast later, so it'll get out to another audience. But I agree. I do think it is important for leaders to speak up when I get a little hesitant about, well, we're live on LinkedIn. I get a little hesitant about being live on LinkedIn and sharing something about my son, but he has been on my podcast as a guest, or on my podcast, that when he finally went and got help after being 10 years doing drugs and alcohol, it was the day before I was supposed to be in a class for new flag officers and senior executives in the Navy and the Marine Corps. So new admirals, generals, and senior executives. I had been promoted, and you could listen to that episode, but I decided not to go and be his mom down there because he was 23 and he was like an hour and a half away. I stayed in that class because I wanted to send him a message that I knew he had his own back. I have his back, but he doesn't need me down there. And he was in the hospital for like 4 days detoxing. But my point is that at that class, there was like a couple hundred people there. And I stood up and I said, this is what I'm going through right now.
Wow.
And I guarantee that as leaders, you all have somebody back in your office that knows somebody or knows of somebody or is related to somebody that's addicted to drugs or alcohol right now, and they're ashamed to admit it. And so as leaders, it's ours. And that's why I used the fact that I was a senior executive to speak out on that, because I felt like people would listen to me more. People think like, oh, she's at this level, she's got everything all together. No, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of people remember me for that. I actually went to one Navy command and two, and one of them I spoke about it. And I think the admiral was like, yeah, no one's got a problem here. But the first person that raised their hand said, I'm raising my daughter because my granddaughter, because my daughter's an addict. Another guy said, my son overdosed twice this week and I don't know what to do. So many people kept raising their hand. So as leaders, we need to make it okay to talk about it.
Yeah. And I think also, like, I mean, I at the time was like, I'm not a leader. And I think there's a lot of us that don't see ourselves as leaders, but we really are leaders too. Yeah. And I think that's like important as well, is to be like, hey, being a leader can be many different things, right?
It's not your position.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I always thought, I'm like, well, I'm not an executive. I'm not someone in some higher level. But then I realized, like, no, I'm not. But at the same time, I have a lot of people that really listen to what I have to say. And that in itself is leadership as well.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. I completely agree.
Yeah.
So that was awesome that you helped so many people by speaking out. That was the first time that you became like real vulnerable and transparent.
Yes. And I was super scared because I'm somebody that has never been very vulnerable. I come from a family that we keep our emotions intact and we do not cry and we do not do any of those things. And so for me, it was tough for sure.
Yeah. But then that gave you courage, right? All that people reaching out to you. Like I made a post the other day and not everyone commented, but I got all these messages through LinkedIn about how the message resonated and why. So it's cool when you can help other people by sharing your story, because, you're not alone. Other people are going through the exact same thing you are.
Yeah, that's what I've said before, is that it's really shocking to me that we have almost, 8 billion people in this world, but yet everyone still feels like they're alone and that they're the only one experiencing something. I think, okay, what are the odds that many people in this world that you have at least one person experiencing what you are or have experienced, right? Like that's something that I still don't understand, why people
because people like don't share it. They only share their highlight reel.
Yeah.
And people don't talk about it except among like really close friends or something. I don't know. Yeah, it's like it's not professional to talk about it.
Yeah, it's odd to me, and I even had a conversation yesterday. So I don't know if you saw my post. So I used to have coffee with a bunch of older gentlemen, and they range from like mid 60s to even their 80s. And I used to have coffee with them once a week, and I loved it because it was like the older generation brought a lot of wisdom and insight. And yesterday I met them for the first time in over a year because they all had been vaccinated. They called me. They're like, Raquel, we're back at your coffee. Come say hi. So I did. I surprised them. And we were talking about veterans and the military, coming back home. And so obviously a lot of mental health. So we were talking about it. And I love that even that generation, even though they're even more closed off of,
Yes.
and they were like, it's so important to talk about in a way where there is no stigma. And it's like, just like everyday conversation of like, hey, I broke my arm, or, hey, like, I didn't feel so hot today. And you're like, oh man, you didn't, like, what can we do to help? As opposed to like, wow.
Right.
Yeah, so it was really nice to hear their perspective, because they're the first ones that you believe that would be like, don't be sharing that stuff.
Well, the thing is I guess it's because it's invisible. Like, you can't look at you and see, that you were depressed one day.
And let me tell you, people that are depressed, some of them are really good at hiding it. I was really good at hiding it. And even recently, Demi Lovato just did a documentary about how her overdose with heroin, and how, and everyone around her, I didn't see it fully, but I saw some clips, and a lot of people were talking about how she hit it really well, and she was really good at making herself out to seem like everything was okay. And that just goes to show you that you cannot assume just because someone's smiling and like, hey, everything's great, everything's okay, that they're really not like just dying inside.
Right. I've seen pictures. Some people have posted on like Instagram, here's a picture of what someone depressed looks like, and here's a picture of someone not depressed, and it's the same thing. It means they look fine, right?
Yeah.
And you wouldn't notice it. So
So
how have you what do you do to handle your depression or to live with it?
So I'm in a really good place. I was just telling my sister today that, like, ironically enough, in this pandemic, I'm in the best mental state I've ever been, like the happiest I've ever been, because I think I've really taken the time to use this as like reflection, and really, going inward and looking at all the good. Like, I've gotten really good at looking at the positive. That's something where before I was quick to look at the negative.
Okay.
And, oh, woe is me. And like, oh, like gosh, feel so sorry for me. I don't know why I had that mentality, where now I'm like, we all go through stuff. Like, we all have problems. Like, my problems compared to so many others is nothing. So why am I going to sit here and complain about something that, like, really in the grand scheme of things is not the end of the world? And so that's kind of helped me a lot. And, honestly, I have 2 kids. And
but how did you shift that though? Because for some people,
it took a while.
Yeah, all those negative comments or thoughts in your mind, how do you get rid of them and switch them out for something positive?
For me, I was able to do it just over time, and it just kind of happened recently. So if you think about it, I attempted suicide when I was like 21. I'm going to be 46 this year, and just in the last couple of years do I feel like I'm just in a really good state of mind. But like, I was just having this conversation and being fully transparent and vulnerable. My brother, he's younger than me, just 5 years younger. He just can't get out of that state of mind. Everything's negative. He's the victim. He cannot see the positive on things. And so I was just talking about that with my sister, where it's really hard for us, because my sister and I both have that same type of, like, we look at the positive. We have such a great outlook on life, and he's the complete opposite.
Wow.
And it's like so hard for us when that's like our blood, our brother, where we share the same DNA. And it's like, how is it that he is not able to see the world in the same lenses that we can? And it's hard. So there are plenty of people that just can't get out of that negative thought process. And he's a perfect example, where he's surrounded by people that are positive. And it doesn't do anything
for him, though. He's like, why can't I be like Raquel?
Yeah, it is. I think it's tough for him to see both my sister and I kind of be like, hey, like, it sounds a little condescending sometimes when you say, like, oh, just let it go, like, but at the same time, like, we were talking about it, but like, no, really, just let it go. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're not trying to be a-holes about it. We're just like, you just at some point got to let that stuff go.
Yeah. I mean, if you can try to be, does he practice mindfulness? Because I think when you practice mindfulness and bring your mind to just the present situation,
Yeah.
you can't really worry about the past and the future. I don't know if that helps or not.
We were talking about that too, about how meditation is really important, even if it's for 30 seconds or 3 hours. Like that's something that most people need to learn how to exercise. But yeah, no, it's a tough one. But I mean, that's the thing, like, you know, and the reason why you wanted me on here was to talk about, you know, that inner child. And, you know, I've come to a point where I grew up pretty quickly and I've always been very mature, and I got married young and had my child at a young age. So I feel like right now I'm tapping into that inner child that I never really tapped into before. And, you know, yeah, it might be 45 tapping into it now, but hey, it shouldn't matter what age you're like, you should still be able to embrace that inner child and embrace the playfulness and to have fun. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now, just because for so many years I just was trying to be like this, you know, adult and very mature.
What does that mean to you, embracing your inner child? What does that mean? Like, what do you mean by that?
It means, you know, there's a reason why I have on my LinkedIn Queen of Goofiness, because it's like I'm a goofball, and like, but I love it when I'm a goofball. Like there's something, and I'm sure, you know, if you ask anybody, like let's say there's a snowstorm, right? And you go outside and you're like throwing the snowballs around and you're having a snow fight. Like there's something that happens like internally, like there's some chemistry. I don't know what it happens. Like you just feel so free. And there's something about it where you're like, I don't give a crap of what's happening, right? Like I'm just having fun. And that feeling is so like euphoric in a way that for me is really important. So, oh, hey, Bill.
Hi, Bill.
So that's what it means to me, is to just be in that state of like euphoria, in that state of like, hey, I'm just having fun. And I'm just like at the core, just like really being like just who I am in that moment. Like I'm not worrying about what I look like. I'm not worrying about what people say, because there's plenty of times that I've done stuff like that where people are like, I'll get messaged. So like, for instance, it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was a lip sync battle going on within the mortgage industry. And I, you know, I was in the mortgage industry, so I got tagged. And it was a Saturday and I was just sitting watching Netflix and I get tagged on this thing. And usually I don't go buy into the challenges, because you can get caught up in that. And you're like, okay, I can't do this anymore. So I try not to feed into that. But for whatever reason, it was a Saturday night. And I was like, I'm going to do it. So I was like, gosh, what am I going to do? I hadn't showered. Like I literally hadn't, my hair was greasy. So I put up in a bun. I have no makeup on. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do Madonna Vogue. I don't know why that song came to my head. So I went ahead and pressed record and I just lip synced to Madonna Vogue. I put on a blazer and I had my hair up and I edited it where it was like black and white. And then I had the Vogue. I mean, I looked ridiculous. Like,
where did you have to post that? Where did you post
it? On LinkedIn. So like I said, it's Saturday night. I did it. I was like, screw it. I'm going to do it, because I just had so much fun. And I looked like
I got to go to your page and see that.
You have to go see it. I'm going to send you the link, because it's probably buried like in, you know, my profile.
Gosh, but I'm going to send it to you. That.
But I posted it and I was like, you know what? I had so much fun doing it. And so I when I did it, it was amazing how many people messaged me separately and they're like, man, I could never do that. And like, I wish I could be as carefree as you, or I wish I could not care about what other people thought, or like, you know what, you're reminding me not to take yourself too seriously. And you're reminding me of like, it's just important to have fun in life. And so that's essentially why I do that, because I want other people to feel the way that I feel in those moments, because it really is a fantastic feeling not to give a crap and just have fun.
What did it take for that to happen for you? Like, how did you find that inner child and how did you embrace it? Like, is there something that you did? Did it happen just through COVID, or?
I mean, that's a really good question, because I've been trying to think about it, right? Because everyone's asking me like, how did you come up with this YouTube?
Is it just because you're over 40, you can do it now?
Maybe as you get older, you just kind of don't really care what other people think. And I truly do believe that as you get older, you kind of just like let that stuff go. You become wiser and you're just kind of like, hey, life is short, especially with COVID. You realize like life really is short and you have no idea what's going to happen. So I think that kind of helped, where I was like, you know what? I might go tomorrow and I want to be able to like say that I lived a good life and I had fun and I enjoyed myself and have no regrets. And I think that kind of mentality helped it as well. And then just the fact that I was having these conversations with these kids, that has helped tremendously, because when I'm having a conversation with a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, like the other day I had one with a 13-year-old girl, Kaylin, and I felt like I was talking to my 13-year-old self. I really did.
Oh,
Because
that's so cool.
we related in so many different ways. She was talking about how she likes to express herself through her hair and how she cuts it and colors it. And that's what I used to do. And then she was talking about how she herself is very mature and likes to talk to adults rather than kids a lot of times. Like I was that person where with my parents, I was always like having conversations with their friends. And so I joked around with her and I was like, you know what, Kaylin, maybe this is why I like having conversations with kids, is because I didn't allow myself to have that when I was younger. Like I was too busy, worrying about what the adults thought of me and then worrying about like being mature enough for them, that I just kind of missed the boat.
That's an interesting thought, and maybe interviewing little kids would help me remember my childhood, because I don't remember a lot of it. I don't know why. It's just the way my brain works, but it would help me remember. Oh yeah, that's what it was like to be 13.
No, it definitely like triggers like these memories in me, and I think everybody should have the opportunity to talk to our youth, because and not only does it remind you of your childhood, but it also has you realizing like, wow, when we were younger, we all had this like innocence and this like creativity, and we were all very artistic, and somewhere along the way, like it was just either suppressed or kind of like, people manipulated it in the sense of like, yeah, you don't want to do that, you want to do this, or this is going to make you money and this is a type of career. Like, yeah, I think we just have all these like external influences as we get older that totally like molds us in a certain way. And so I think talking to these kids, it just is reminding me how creative and artistic kids are, and we're not doing a good job of keeping that alive and nourishing it, because the first thing that goes in like public school education are the arts and music. That's
so so your YouTube channel is Raq The Boat.
Yes.
RAQ.
Yeah.
For your first name, The Boat. And you've been interviewing children, like from what age to what age?
So I just say anybody under the age of 21, but it's my sweet spot it seems to be like between 9 and 12 years old.
When did you start that podcast or that YouTube channel?
So I started the channel, I want to say like maybe right before Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving. I know it was around the holidays.
Okay, so during COVID.
Mary Lou. So yeah, definitely during COVID. It was one of those things where I had my mentor and I had other people kept saying, you have to have a podcast, because I'm the one that's always the guest, and everyone's like, you need to be the one interviewing. Like you love to talk, like you could talk all day long, and you're really.
What makes you think, okay, yeah, that's right, and I'm going to interview 7, 9, 10-year-olds?
Well, that's the thing is like I'm thinking, okay, yeah, you're right. Like I love to have talk, and I can talk all day long to anybody and everybody. Like I'm really good at having conversations. I said, but the thing about myself that I've really kind of owned is that I like to be different. I like to go against the grain. I'm one of those people where if I see that a space is getting saturated or there's too much in that space, I'm like, get me out. And so I think that's what I felt. And and this is no disrespect to, live streaming and podcast or anything. I just was like, you know what? I don't want to have to compete with a lot of those folks, because a lot of those folks are my friends. I was like, I don't want to really like compete in the sense of like having the same guests and having it overlapping. I don't know. So it just came to me one day where I'm like, well, nobody's talking to kids and I'm really good with kids. So you know what? I'm going to be that person. Nobody else is doing it. So why not be the one doing it? And it could have been a total bust. Like, let's be real. I mean, it could have been like me having conversations and nobody giving a flying, whatever, and be like, I have no interest in hearing what a child has to say. But as soon as I started uploading them and then, repurposing them on my LinkedIn and Instagram, everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is great. And I've been getting such great feedback. And not only that, I've been learning a ton. I've been learning so much that I never envisioned that I would learn. Like I thought like, I just want to have a conversation with kids, empower them, make them feel special, have them feel heard, not realizing there was going to be so many more different layers to what I was doing.
Like what?
For instance, this is something that I think has been amazing, is that as a parent, we tend to be a little bit impatient with our children. We tend to be a little bit short with them. And then in return, the kid is always like, they don't really want to listen to their parents. They're a little bit disrespectful, a little sassier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening with social media and COVID is that a lot of these parents aren't getting to see their child interact with a stranger, let alone an adult stranger.
Yeah.
And that's really important as a part of their development and their social skills. Like they should be able to interact with an adult and have those social skills and be able to like look at an adult in the eye and be able to actually answer their questions. And so what's happening is that I think these kids are really surprising their parents, because every child that I've had a conversation with has been really respectful, very engaging, really insightful, very open and honest in themselves. And so what's happening is these parents are seeing the videos, because I always send it to the, to the parents first, and they're like so proud of their kids.
Like, wow, that's so my proud. Daughter, that's my son.
Because what happens a lot of times is they'll warn me ahead of time. Oh, yeah, my child is a super introvert, like super shy, like good luck getting anything out of their mouth. Right? Or the opposite of like, my child's like major ADD, like ADHD, like good luck having them sit still and actually like listen to you.
I think it's kind of like when you drop them off at the babysitter, right? Where, and they behave perfectly for the babysitter. So it's probably something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Where they're always like preemptively like, hey, I just want
right.
Because as a parent,
he won't go to bed, he won't do this, he won't do that. And then they're like, yeah, he went to bed right at his bedtime.
He ate all his food, he ate his vegetables, all. But I think
you must be a loser parent.
I think that's what happens, right? As a parent, we know that if the kid, is misbehaving, the first person they blame is the parent, because they're like, you're obviously not parenting your child, or you're not disciplining your child. Right. So it's like insecurity as a parent. So I feel like that's like what's happening. But every single child has been so amazing, and so I love it because they get to see their kid in a completely different light. Yeah. And so I feel that in that moment, it almost begins to change the dynamic of that parent and that child. Because what's happening too is a lot of times I'm hearing that as soon as the kid is finished having a conversation with me, they're so excited that they had an adult listen to what they had to say, that they go and like are sharing with their parents. And then their parents are like, this is so cool. Like my kid's actually having a conversation with me, and they're sharing all this stuff. And so like that part of it, I just wasn't very aware of it until now. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense that these parents would be like, wow, like my kid is actually like doing really well. And not only that, like I'm actually doing okay as a parent if my child is acting that way or responding that way to a total stranger.
So what kinds of things have you learned from these interviews with kids?
They're much smarter than we think they are. And not only are they much smarter, but I think we're so quick to assume that because they have access to all this technology and all this social media, that they, for whatever reason, are like robotic, or they don't have feelings.
Yeah.
And I realize these kids they're human just like we are. They want the same exact things that we do. They still crave human connection. They're still wanting to feel heard. They still want to feel acknowledged. They want to, feel worthy. They want to feel love. All the same things as adults we're like trying so hard to grasp at.
And
like
you can't get any of that from a video game and texting and TikTok and Instagram. You can't get any of that from that.
No, so it goes to show you that we really are wired in a certain way, that these kids, they are still craving that too. I think it's almost like it was like almost forced upon them, the social media and the technology, where I think a lot of the kids are kind of like weren't ready for it, but they have to be, because that's what's out there and everybody else is doing it. But I feel like a lot of these kids, like if there was no social media or, video games or internet, like they'd be perfectly fine, because we were perfectly fine.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
oh, that.
Yeah, so that's why I want people to realize when they watch these videos of like, hey, there's still so much commonality. Like the generational gap is not as large as you think it is. And because of that, like take the time and the energy to actually interact with not only your only child, but someone else's child. Because, I'm realizing that these kids, they have it way worse than we do. I mean, social media and the pandemic, like I can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I really can't. So that's why I was like, how can I in some way give them a platform or give them a voice or give them a sense of purpose? And that's, I feel like what I'm doing with them. And I know it's working, and I'll tell you why. Because these kids keep asking their parents if they can talk to me again. I just got that again today. I had someone else like, hey, and these are like young boys. They're like 12, 13, very impressionable, like preteens, where it's probably not cool to talk to, an adult,
Right.
but they're asking their parents like, hey, when can I get on her channel again? And so that's the thing is I told all these kids like, hey, this is about building a relationship with them. So I want them to know that this is not like a one and done, you're on here and moving on. Like, no. Anytime you want to talk and you want to share something and you want to do it with me on the channel, let me know. Or if you want to do it offline, that's also available to you. Like I tell them to like, hey, you don't need to only.
Oh, your internet cut out.
Oh, I'm back.
You're back. Okay.
Okay. I don't know where I cut off, but I was just saying that I want these.
You're like,
yeah.
you have more conversation.
Oh yeah, I don't want them to feel like the only way they can talk to me is if it's being recorded for the channel. Like I want them to know that if they want to talk to someone and they just need someone to listen to them, that they have access to me offline as well.
How do these kids and how do the parents find you, and how do they, if someone's listening, which right now not a lot of people are listening, but they will. But if someone's listening and they want their child or a child wants to be on your YouTube channel, how would they go about doing that?
So a lot of these kids have been through my LinkedIn connections.
Okay.
Because I go ahead and repurpose the stuff and show it on there. And so, yeah, I'm lucky where I have people reach out to me and say, hey, I want you to talk to my child. I think they'd be great. So you can just message me through LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram too. So if you're on Instagram or even, email me, but it's super, there's like no criteria. Cause I had someone today ask me like, hey, how can my grandkids apply? And I'm like, there's no application. Like, all youth are welcome. There's no criteria. You don't have to, it's not like America's Got Talent or any of those things where you have to have some kind of special thing that, no, everyone's special. Every kid is special in their own way and they all deserve to be heard. So I don't want anyone to think that like it's exclusive at all.
So what are the kinds of topics that you've talked about, and how many interviews have you done so far?
So I just uploaded my 29th conversation. Wow. And I have talked a lot about video games.
Now you're an expert.
Yeah, Fortnite and Minecraft are very popular. Oddly enough, a lot of them are artists. A lot of them like to draw. And luckily, being that I'm a kid myself, I can relate to like Marvel, all the Marvel stuff that's out there. I can relate to Star Wars because I went ahead and binged all the Star Wars movies and the Mandalorian series because of one of the girls that I had spoken to.
Well, you've got to do your conversation or interview prep, right? So you got to be up to speed on what they might want to talk about.
Yeah, like I have to be able to seem like somewhat cool, right? Like where I can get it. And so, in the fact that I have 2 kids myself, for whatever reason, like I thought at first it was going to be kind of like pulling teeth out of these kids, but it's amazing how they just kind of carry the conversation. Like as soon as I hit record, it's amazing how some of them like they're the ones like sharing information. They're like, oh, and then I do this, and then the other day this happened, and then oh, my brother did that. Like I love it because I don't have to prep for it like with questions at all. Like I come with 0 questions because I'm confident enough with my skill set that I know that it's going to go into like really cool conversations. And, even the other day, Michael Ray on LinkedIn, he does Smile Project Louisville.
No, I don't think so.
You need to follow him. I'm going to meet him for the first time. He's flying out to California to do random acts of kindness out here. So he does random acts of kindness. And we become really good friends. I had my second conversation with his 14-year-old son, and we actually we talked a little bit about mental health. And his son was like very receptive to it. And I remember when I stopped recording, I said, hey, Sam, if you don't want to be the one that's kind of the recipient of this conversation on the other end, like let me know and I can cut this out, or we don't have to be, on the video, because I don't want to open it up to people be mean to these kids or bullying or any of that.
Because you're not broadcasting live. You're just doing it.
I'm not broadcasting live, but it's on YouTube. I mean, anybody can, can watch it if you think about it. So he's like, no,
Hi,
it's
Jim.
really important. Yeah, he's like, hey, Jim. He's like, it's really important that people talk about it. And I love that he like understood the value of us being able to talk about mental health and how important it is to think positively, because he just had he has a lot of insight and great perspective. And for a 14-year-old boy to have that and be okay with it and want to share with it, I thought it was really special. And so I really appreciated that he was okay with that.
Yeah. Like, what are the kinds of things he said? First off, that he even felt that it was important to talk about. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, I actually shared with him in that we were talking about school. I know what it was. We were talking about school, and I said, "How's school going?" He's like, "Next question." So I knew I hit a nerve when he's like, and I said, "Okay, and so we were talking about the stresses of it, and we were talking about how like it's really not the end of the world, and how it's important to be able to not stress out too much, because stressing is not going to change the outcome, and all like little things like that. And so so I went ahead and shared with him. He didn't know, and I said, by the way, I got to a place. Oh, because I was talking about how I was a perfectionist and had a lot like OCD at his age. He's like, me too. And I said, okay, I get that. I said, but that's where it can be an issue, because what happens is when you're a perfectionist and you have OCD and you want to be like controlling of everything, when things are not going your way, you can spiral. And I told him, I said, that's what happened to me. And I shared with him that I had been depressed and attempted suicide in college. And you can tell that like he didn't know how to react to it.
Yeah.
Very quiet. And he was just, and he's like, oh, wow. And then after, he was like, by the way, like, yeah, I think he might have said, thank you for sharing that. Or like, that was like, he was very appreciative. Like, that's what I mean. Like, he took it all in. And I think he even said, I didn't say anything because I was shocked. I go in like a bad way. He's like, no, I just didn't know what to say or how to respond, which is a very valid.
Most adults wouldn't either.
Yeah. So I love that he was it was very honest of like, hey, I didn't know how to respond, but like, thank you for sharing that. And you can tell like he was very, appreciative of it, but yeah, just didn't know what to say or do. And that's okay. Like, that's a fully honest reaction. So yeah, like things like that. And I've had some kids be honest about how it's hard for them to have virtual learning and not be around their friends and be super isolated. Like one Natasha, she's 12. She moved to California and then moves to California, and then COVID happened. So she's like has zero friends that she's met where she's at in Northern California. And so I know her mom was very, very much like, thank you for being someone that she can talk to. And I've had 3 conversations with her, and we're going to meet for the first time. They're flying down from California. They're flying down to LA. I'm going to drive up, and already she was texting me, Natasha, the 12-year-old, and she's like, I can't wait to meet you. And I'm so excited. And you know what I mean? Like that's like the beauty of it, that I really am forming these friendships with these kids. Like I want to be that person like down the road. They're like, hey, I'm getting married. You're invited.
you're gonna be going to so many weddings.
Like graduation.
How old are you now? 40 something?
I'll be 46 this year, 2045.
Okay, so 46. So they might be getting married in, I don't know, you'll be 56. You might be in your 60s. In your 60s, you typically go to your grandkids' weddings, maybe, or, but you're not going to all, weddings a lot, but you're going to be.
Yeah. Well, I would hope so. Like,
That's awesome.
I really want to be able to stay in touch with these kids and kind of see their journey, and how cool for them too to have, a conversation where they can look back and be like, oh my gosh, look at what I said. Look at my 10-year-old self or my 11-year-old self. Like, this is what I was sharing with this person, and this is what like I was experiencing in the moment. So I love that
for their inner child when they get older. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been incredible, and it's something where it's like I even sometimes have to sit there and be like, gosh, Raquel, you came up with a pretty darn cool idea.
You really did. You really did.
And I just love it.
Yeah. I just recently took a class for coaches. It was all about positive intelligence, and it was about like, we have saboteurs, like our inner critic and stuff, and then we have the sage side of our brain, which can be compassion and all that. And one of the things that we did he led us through like a 20-minute meditation of us as a child, maybe mine is when I'm age 5, and I have it as my screensaver now. And just look at that child, and what do you see? And realizing that essence of that child is still in you. Yeah. And why would we would never snap at a child? Why do we snap at ourselves, or why do we beat ourselves up for stupid stuff? We would hopefully never do that to a little child, and we still have that inner child in us.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because I actually have a picture of myself that's framed, and I have it in my kitchen so that every morning when I wake up and I go down there and get my coffee, it's like a reminder. And I don't know, I think it was one of my mom's friends took it, but it's in black and white, and I think I might have been in someone's backyard, but I have a dress on. I might have been like 5 or 6 years old, and it's a candid picture of me, just like, I think I was like skipping or something, and I'm just like, have the biggest smile, and it's just like, it's a reminder of like that me in that joyful moment, and just like, that is the definition of like joy. And so I have that framed because it's a reminder to be like, hey, Raquel, that's still in there. Tap into it.
Like your fingerprint, it's that unique essence. It's you. There's only one you.
Yeah.
And you're still that child. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the fact that like as adults we do such a major job of trying to like suppress that, I don't understand, because I think a lot has to do with, for whatever reason, we think that if you're being playful or fun or silly, you're not being serious or professional, or you're not smart.
Right.
I think actually it's the opposite. I think it's a huge sign of intelligence. And I'm not trying to like say like, oh, I'm so smart. I'm just saying it's a sign of intelligence to be like, hey, I'm embracing like who I truly am in the core. Like, I think that's what it shows, as opposed to, oh, I got to hide that because people need to,
grow up,
look,
whatever.
Yeah,
look professional.
But what does that mean, right? Like,
yeah.
Or what we have this like rhetoric of like this narrative, and I'm like, who came up with that in the freaking first place?
That's the thing is, a lot of what I've been looking at is like my paradigms and what I believe. And then why do I believe that? And you believe it maybe because someone said that, or something happened to you a long time ago. And if it doesn't serve you anymore, you need to just let it go and think about life differently.
Yeah. And it's not easy. That's for sure. Right. Because even for me, I've put up such a persona and such a front and an image of who I was, that like I hid like the real me, the true me. And so now the real me is coming up. But it's interesting how people would be like, oh, wow, you're different, or you've changed. I'm like, no. I'm just more of who I've always been. Like, even my mom made a comment when I got divorced 10 years ago. I remember we were out, she had come to visit. So we're divorced. I think we were like sitting at a restaurant bar, just having some drinks, just really kind of like just having a moment. And she turned to me and she's like, I like you better divorced. And I go, okay, well, what does that mean? She's like, I don't know. She's like, you're like, there's this like sensual, sexy side to you, and the side of you that I've never seen, and the side of you that this, I'm like, Mom, all those sides, they've been there. I never felt comfortable enough to show them and showcase them. I go, that's the difference. It's like, I'm not changing who I am necessarily. It's just, I'm now allowing that person to be seen. And that's what you're seeing. It's not necessarily me being a completely different
person. Yeah.
So that's
awesome.
kind of, so that's how I see a lot of us when people might look at you or someone, be like, wow, they've really like changed and they've this and that. It's like, no, I think it's just they're better at embracing like who they really are and to the world.
Why does it take some inner work to figure out who we really are? I guess we just get all these masks, all these layers of different things happen in our life that.
Yeah. All these external, things that just kind of come at us in this way that like we, for whatever reason, listen to it. We buy into it. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's what it is. Like, why do we buy into all of that stuff?
Mm-hmm. Some of it's like if you were bullied as a kid, or just different things like that can still impact you as an adult.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the tough one, right? Is like, we've all kind of we all experience some kind of trauma in some kind of way. That's what I found is I thought, for the longest time that trauma meant that you had to go through like, child abuse or sexual abuse or like some kind of like a death in the family. Like I thought it had to be like huge. And then I realized like, no, you can experience emotional trauma on so many different levels. And I just learned that a couple of years ago. And I realized that so many people are starting to realize that too. And it's like, okay, so we've all had our trauma. Now let's go ahead and figure out like how we can kind of move forward with it and not let it define us and not let us like hold us back. Because I mean, the more and more we open up, the more and more we realize, like we were saying, I think even before the live, that we're not alone.
No.
Like, and so that's why I tell people like, just share your story, because if you can help one person, it's worth it. It's worth that uncomfortableness. It definitely is, because I've been uncomfortable sharing some things, but when I find out that I helped someone, I'm like, okay, you know what? Who gives a crap that I felt awful and I was having some anxiety, because it's so worth it that I helped someone else. And I feel like if more people thought about it that way, of like, me sharing this is not like, oh, I'm sharing my business and I'm being so personal, whatever. It's like, no, you're doing it so that you can help somebody else. And we're so many of us are so generous.
Yes.
A lot of us are very selfless. So if we think about it in that sense, I think more people would be willing to open up. Well, at least at least that's how I see it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I started the Onward movement, and we have a manifesto. And one of the things in that manifesto, well, a lot of it is about you're not alone. It's we find strength in sharing our story.
Yeah, I don't know what my sister's doing in there, by the way.
And we one of the other things is that we know how to ask. We ask for help. We ask for help when we need it, because I think a lot of people are really like, oh yeah, sorry about that, Mary Lou. I missed your comment. Society gives us rules and then we abide by it, and then the layers start, sadly. Yeah, and that's just what happens, and it takes a while to just realize that that's what happened.
Yeah.
But, so that's what the Onward Movement's all about, sharing our story, realizing that we're not alone. And so many people that I've interviewed on this podcast have shared how they faced adversity in life and how that helped them discover who they are along the way.
Yeah. So. But see how like everybody's going through, like, once again, it's like we're all going through that. We go through different phases. Like there's that book, my dad recommended it, and I read it, I go back to it from time to time. It's called Phases. And I think it starts at the 20s and 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And yeah, we're all going through these different phases. And I just wish that we would just realize that, and then we wouldn't be so judgmental of one another. Like that's another thing that I can't understand, that like everybody has hardships, everybody's had struggles, everybody's going through stuff, but yet we're so quick to judge someone else when they're going through it, or the way they're responding to it, or if they make a mistake. It's like we just don't practice enough grace. And yeah, that's something that I've learned a lot. Like I'm like, wow, everyone's kind of done something that's made, not necessarily a regret, but kind of been like, oh, that might have not been the best decision, but I learned from it. And because of it, I'm like, I'm going to do better next time. Just like Oprah says, like, when you know better, you do better. Right. So it's like, and I think that's something, speaking of kids, and I had this conversation with my son and a lot of his fraternity friends over the weekend, because I picked him up from tech. And I was talking to them because they were very open about cancel culture. And about the phones and how they have to like be really careful. I mean, we were talking about like even the guys, they were like with girls, like they have to be overly like aware of what they say, of what they do, because you just never know what's going to be said and how it's going to turn around, and it can literally ruin the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So we were talking about it, and the issue that I have with that is that these kids are realizing that they can't make any mistakes, because then everybody in the world's going to know. So then what happens? Something bad, they make a mistake, and then they realize that it's the end of the world. And what do? They take their lives. And that's why committing suicide is like on the rise. It's because we're not giving these kids the opportunity to be kids.
Right. Right.
I can't, I mean, it's funny because I don't feel old, but I start thinking like I'm older when I start talking about like, if we had social media or phones when I was a teenager or when I was in college, oh dear Lord, right? Like, and that's what I say. And so when I think about my kids and what they're experiencing, I'm like, man, that's why I'm not too hard on them. I really like my ex-husband and I, we co-parent very well. And we pretty much, it's not that we allow our kids to do anything that they want, but we really give them the space to kind of like do things and then mess up and then hopefully have it be a safe space for them so that they can learn on their own too. Because I think that's something that we're going to realize like further down the road, how these younger generations are being affected by the fact that they can't really be kids and make mistakes.
They're going to, when I was growing up, I feel like that I was prevented from making some mistakes. And so then I made the mistakes once I got out of the house.
Yeah.
So they're going to make them at some point. And then, well, it wasn't a felony thing for me or anything, but at some point the mistake could be really, really bad, that you could go to jail for. It could be a felony or something like that. I mean, I don't know, but it's just, I think it's smart to let your kids make mistakes and learn from those mistakes at a younger age.
Yeah. And then also make them realize that like, we're not going to be there to pick up the pieces all the time. Right. Because that's another thing too, is I feel like we have a lot more helicopter parents than we did before. And so these parents like don't want their kids to get hurt. They don't want them to suffer. So they're like coddling them and they're protecting them in such a way that when the kid suddenly has a feeling, they're like, I don't know what this feeling is. Like, this is awkward. So then what happens? They start medicating themselves or they start drinking or doing drugs because they're trying to numb those feelings that they're not used to and they're uncomfortable feelings because no one ever taught them like, hey, it's okay to feel this. And I think that's another thing that's happening. And so that's why, like with my kids, we try to let them feel those things. And we're like, hey, that's normal. Like, sit in it.
Right. Letting them know it's normal and being able to talk about it. Yeah. Ooh, there are laws that tell us how to treat people. Thankfully, we are starting to eliminate them. I think COVID gives us the space to really think about that. Everyone was affected by the restrictions at this time and knows how it feels in at least some small scale, but that can be eye-opening.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's another, added element too of, right. Like with COVID is that there's that kind of like, okay, people are telling us what to do and they're making us scared, all of these things. But at the same time, it's like, I need to be able to like have an opinion, or I need to be able to feel something, or I need to be able to have a say of like what it is that I do and I don't do. And so that, I think that's been like a real eye opener for a lot of us, I think. In the sense of like how people really view, I guess, the right to just choose and right to like just have an opinion. I
think it's important, going back to the feelings too. I think it's important to help kids identify to name the feeling. Like I've read a book called Permission to Feel. I think Brene Brown interviewed the author about that book, and it was about how, I think it was in America, so many people can't name their feelings. Happy, sad, good, bad, or whatever, but there's more than that. It's like nervous, anxious, there's so many different feelings, and to be able to name them is really important.
No, absolutely. Cause I've actually had my daughter approach me a couple times, and she's going to be 17. So she's like right in the height of like teenage years and, high school and the teenage trauma and the typical stuff that we all experience. Right. So she's approached me because she doesn't know the difference between like sadness, depression, boredom, all of those. And because I've experienced depression, she comes to me and she's like, hey mom, this is what I've been feeling. This is what I've been doing. And most of the time I'm like, sweetie, you're a teenager. Like that's a normal thing for a teenager to experience and feel, like you're not depressed. Because I don't want I think that's a quick thing for people to be like, automatically be like, I'm so depressed. Like, I think that's kind of thrown around a lot too, where if they're sad or like something went wrong and it's like, and then they just bummed about it. They're like, oh, I'm so depressed about, and it's like, no, there's a difference between bummed about something and sad, or like, as opposed to being depressed. Like, have to make sure that they understand the difference.
Right. And that they learn how to feel it, like you said, and be in it. and just feel it, and then know that it will pass. You don't have to go numb it.
Yeah.
I just read something. Oh, I just read an article about like the amount of liver failure in women has skyrocketed, because I think a lot of women are coming home drinking wine and stuff like that. So, but just that's a way of like numbing your feelings, right?
Yeah, and also talking about it, right? Like having parents give that space for their kids to be able to talk, because like my daughter's just like me. We don't like to share our feelings. As vulnerable as I can be, I'm not a feely person. I'm not very affectionate. She isn't either.
Right.
So there was one day that she came over, and my ex-husband called me and he's like, hey, Amelia's on her way over there. Like, talk to her. I know something's going on with her. Because we're very perceptive with our kids because we're so close to them. And he's like, listen, she must be stressed out about something. Be like, hey, but just like talk. And I was like, okay, thanks for the heads up. So she came in, she kind of like went up to her room and she wanted dinner, and she goes like back and forth because she has her license. And so I don't want to be like right away, like, what's wrong, right? Because then automatically like they shut down, like, I'm not talking to you, right? So, she kind of like went up to her room. So I went upstairs and I think I was like, hey, sweetie, like if there's something going on, like I want you to know that you can talk to me. I'm going to go downstairs and make you dinner whenever you're ready to like kind of talk about it. Like I'm here. Like I'll listen. And she's like, okay. And so I went downstairs, and then she came downstairs and she looked like she was like ready on the verge of tears or something. And I said, what's going on? She's like, I don't want to talk about it. I said, listen, I'm going to tell you from experience, because once again, it's like if you're able to say from experience, like Amelia, from experience, I was you in the sense of like wanting to not talk about it, shut it down. I'm like, don't do what I did. I said, because that's what led me down that road, because I didn't want to talk to anybody. I said, so I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to feel so much better if you just talk about it. Like, I don't have to say anything. I don't have to like give you any advice. I'm like, just
no judgment.
Nothing. Just say it. Like, just get it out. Like, just cry. And the waterworks, and she just started crying. And then it led to like how she felt about our relationship. And it was very eye-opening, because it was things where I'm like thinking I'm super close to my daughter, but yet in her mind, she's like, Mom, we're not as close as you think we are. And I'm like, well, explain to me why, because I want to know what I can do better. So it was like, we really talked it through. And then at the end, I was like, do you feel better? And she's like, I do. And I was like, okay. And that was it. Like, I didn't want to be like, I told you so, or like, I just was like, do you feel good? And that's when I realized, like, gosh, it's so important for us as parents to just give them that no judgment, that judgment-free zone. Like, we have to be able to just like pull back as a parent.
Easily said, look, I'm the mom, I'm in charge. I'm doing the best I can. This is crazy. Why are you complaining about me? Look at everything I do for you. I mean, there's things that you could have said.
And I probably would have reacted that way years ago. I will tell you this, since I've had the YouTube channel, I've really reflected and really like started thinking, how am I showing up as a parent? And so it's helped a lot. So yeah, in that moment, I was like, all right, Raquel, like, you're at fault too. Like, you're not the perfect parent here. Like, there's things that you've done. And so that's why I said, listen, I'm trying to learn. Because I told her, I said, listen, my mom is very set in her ways and very stubborn. And I'm like, I want to be different. Like, I want our relationship to be better. So if you can just tell me things that could help. And she did. And it was one of the things that she said. And I had to just eat my pride. Mom, you talk about yourself too much. But when she said that to me, I said, you know what, Amelia? I said, I will tell you why I think I do this. Because I, as a child, never felt heard. I, as a child, could never share my triumphs or all these things, because my parents just didn't want to hear it. Or my brother was younger than me, and he was a troubled kid in the sense that like he did a lot. So I even put myself even more in the back burner. I'm even more of a perfect child, because I was like, they're already having a tough time with him. The last thing I want to do is add to that. So I never spoke up. I never did any of that. So for me, I was like, I didn't feel like I ever had a voice. So with them, they're my kids. And I tell them, I'm like, you guys are my kids. Like, you are everything to me. So when something good happens, or I'm proud of something I've done, like, the first thing I want to do is share it with you guys.
Yeah.
I go, it's not because I want to talk about myself. It's because I want you guys to be proud of me. And it's just that validation. It's my own insecurities. That's why I said, I'm like, it's my insecurities and I'm projecting it on you guys, and I apologize and I will do my best to not do that. And she's like, okay. And so I really like, I hold myself back because I want to tell them like, guess what, this and that. And then I'm like,
yeah, I completely get it because, but what you're doing too is you're teaching your children that you're a human being, and you're not perfect, and that gives them the permission and makes them feel comfortable to talk with you and stuff like that. So that's really awesome. It reminds me of a time, and then we've got to wrap it up, I think. But I remember when I was living in Washington, D.C., and my daughter moved in with me, and she turned 21 when she was living with. And it was the two of us. For some of the time, we were in a 1-bedroom apartment. She was sleeping on the couch until we could move to a 2-bedroom because when she had moved in. And that was a really interesting time. And we both look back, like when we see Facebook pictures about when we were living there and everything, it was just such a fun time. We look back and with fond memories, but it was a challenging time in some ways because she was my daughter, but she wanted to be my roommate.
Yeah.
And so we had to work through, a lot of those issues. I'd say something is like, is that as a mom or is that as my roommate? And I would have to tell her sometimes, even a roommate would say this, pick that up.
I would tell you to make your bed.
But anyway, it was just, good memories. And I know you have good memories with your kids. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I do try my best. And again, like, I've made plenty of mistakes and I've done some things where I'm like, I look back and I'm kind of like, oh, I could have done something better. But as long as like our kids know that we're trying to do better and we are trying to like be good parents, that then I think all they can do is respect us for that. And I feel like that's how it's been with my kids. I feel like they respect me more when I'm able to be like, hey, you know what? I'm the one that effed up on that in that one. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. They respect you.
And I love it because they're like, it's okay, mom. Okay, thanks. And then we move on. Like, that's the cool thing is that no one dwells on anything. Like, we're able to just let it go and just kind of be like, all right, we learned from that moment and let's just move forward.
And you're teaching them to do the same.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So you're, let me see, I'll put this banner up one more time, but your YouTube channel is Raq The Boat. RAQ The Boat.
Yeah, there's 2 Raq The Boat channels. Mine's the one that has like the animated figure on it. The other one I think only has like 11 subscribers and it's some woman and I don't think she has any like videos on there. So there shouldn't be like a mix up really.
Oh, yeah, I saw your little kids animated photos up there. That's really good. So
yeah. So
well, I'm just going to end the live, but then we'll go back into the green room a little bit for just a second. But I really enjoyed our discussion. Any last minute words that you want to leave for listeners? Bits of advice about embracing your inner child as an adult.
I think it's just being able to just laugh and have fun, and it's okay. Like that's it. Just do more stuff that makes you happy and makes you feel alive. Like there's nothing wrong with it. You're not, you know what I mean? Like as long as you're not like hurting anyone, you know what I mean? Or like you're doing anything awful, like, oh, I am here. That's my best friend.
She's your best friend?
Yeah, that's Nancy, my best friend. She's here in California too. She cannot wait to see me. She's in LA and I'm in San Diego, so we're just 2 hours away. But I'm here.
On Michael
Yes. So I feel badly because I'm not doing any lives really while I'm out here. But like I told you, Emily, that I had scheduled yours out. And I know that like if I had canceled tonight, I wouldn't have been able to get on here until like November.
Thank you so much for being here. And Mary Lou says, be human. Yes.
Yeah. And then Nancy goes, see, she's even calling out Annie. What do we need to do to get on your live?
That's what I said at the beginning of the show, Nancy. I said I was interviewing. I listened to Raquel's conversation with Annie the other day, and she was like, I wanted to be live. What do I need to do? So I was asking her, since she's been on Annie's show, like, what is the secret? Do I need to bake her some cookies or something like that? I mean, I
know, but it's funny because I joke around that I have a Boo Bear on LinkedIn. Are you connected with Reggie Waterman?
I don't know. I'll look it up. I don't think
He
so.
has a live stream too, DYOS, and it's funny because we joke around that we're like, you know, a LinkedIn, you know, a couple. And when I said that to Annie, I go, Annie, even my Boo Bear hasn't had me on his live stream. And then oddly enough, later he goes, hey, by the way, so I was going to ask you on my new season if you'd be a guest. I'm like, of course. I'm like, I feel like you're asking me to marry you. Was that a proposal? But yeah, I think we all I think, you know, it is funny how it works with like live streams and guests. You're always kind of like, well, you know, I want to be on that show too. And then so yeah.
Well, thank you for being on mine on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, well, I'm not a big St. Patty's. I'm not a beer drinker, so it's not like I'm going to go grab a beer or anything like that. Definitely not green beer, that's for sure.
Not green beer. Well, enjoy your time out in San Diego, embracing your inner child and being with your family.
Oh yeah, and that's what happens. Being in my hometown, like it definitely comes out even more so when I'm here, because that's like all the memories, you know, are here. And so yeah, that's like my advice is just like, once again, like who's the they that are telling us that we need to act a certain way? Like just have fun. Yeah. And then Jenny. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
Okay, so we did have some viewers. They're just now coming out of the woodwork.
All right. I'll see you guys later.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.